Mr. Secretary, distinguished panelists, distinguished discussants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here representing civil society. I'm a professor of law at the Fundação Getúlio Vargas Law School. And my remarks are actually very short. I won't keep the floor for long. I just would like to make a few considerations about the issue of openness. The idea of openness cuts across the main themes that have been discussed during the IGF. For instance, the theme of diversity and also the theme of access. You cannot discuss any of these themes without discussing the issue of openness. What I would like to do first is to try to give you three dimensions of the theme of openness, and the first dimension is the legal dimension. One of the crucial issues that are being discussed locally and globally today is the issue of exceptions and limitations to copyright. If you think about the issue of openness, if you think about collaborative production of culture, information, and scientific knowledge, this is a crucial issue to be considered. The second issue that I would like to call your attention is the liability of internet service providers and the liability of online service providers, which has to be regulated locally, but the majority of countries actually have not yet regulated these issues. So these are two examples of the issue of openness and how it's made concrete if you consider the legal realm. The second dimension of the theme of openness is a political dimension. In that sense, openness has a very intrinsic relation with governments worldwide, some governments actively supporting openness, actively creating policies towards openness. And above all, there's another dimension to the political issue, which is the cooperation between the IGF and the other United Nations bodies, and I will mention only two, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, especially considering that the development agenda has been approved by the World Intellectual Property Organization, and also the UNESCO Diversity Convention. Both issues are directly related to the issue of openness and should be considered from the standpoint of the IGF. The third and last dimension of openness is an economic dimension. In this dimension, we have seen increasingly the fact that many businesses, many companies have included openness as part of their respective business models. Actually, in some cases, we have been following in the recent years a sort of a race towards openness, in the sense that openness actually increases the value of companies and it creates value in itself. And the second issue from the economic standpoint about openness is related, for instance, to the role of developing countries in regard to openness. And in this case, developing countries cannot afford, for instance, the cost of the lack of interoperability of the systems that the governments worldwide contract. So the issue of openness is directly related also to the issue of interoperability, and this is a crucial and fundamental issue for developing countries. The other dimension in the economic sense is the issue of innovation. Openness lowers the barriers for new entrants in the economic markets, and therefore it also provides innovation. I will finish my short intervention by giving 3 examples of concrete issues that are related to the openness question. The first example is the case for open standards, and as I mentioned, many governments worldwide are increasingly participating in the discussion about open standards. A Brazilian example is the Ministry of Planning, which has created recently the EPING initiative, which is a governmental body that is worried about interoperability and standards. The second concrete example is open source software, which has in many instances also found support by some governments. One example about that is, for instance, governments licensing the code that has been produced by the government itself so that it can be openly and sometimes freely accessed for the citizens of that country, or maybe the citizens worldwide, depending on the license that is being used. And finally, a very important issue that I think the IGF ought also to consider, which is the issue of open access. Open access refers to the broader access towards, for instance, scientific knowledge, about knowledge in itself. And this is a global discussion that takes place right now. One of the important documents about this issue is the Budapest Open Access Initiative that claims scholars worldwide and institutions worldwide to make scientific knowledge available. And in Brazil, we have the Salvador Declaration on Open Access and the São Paulo Letter on scientific knowledge, also going in the same direction. Finally, about the issue of open access, there is a role here for the so-called open licensing of scientific materials and knowledge. And in this sense, initiatives like the Science Commons and the Creative Commons have a role also to play that can be used as a model of how to make this knowledge available for the most people possible. Finally, then I conclude, these are all questions for our panelists. As you know, this discussion is complex, and I believe that the answer we give to these questions is directly related to the type of society that we want to build, either locally or globally. Thank you.